¿Quién es Abigail? Abigail Sánchez. Abigail, acá tenemos una información muy rara. Que tú asignó el sistema de inteligencia artificial.
Sí, soy yo, Abigail Fernández, de México.
Sí, Abigail, ¿tú clicó en alguna herramienta de inteligencia artificial inadvertidamente? ¿No? Caso ocurra alguna interrupción de su participación en esta sala, tú puedes salir y regresar de nuevo, ¿ok?
Ok, gracias.
Tú puede bajar su mano.
¿Qué me saca? Digo que me saca.
Sí, Abigail, no. Y vuelve a ingresar, porque parece que se ha activado alguna...
Ela activó alguna herramienta de inteligencia artificial y entonces puede ser que se caiga en una caída, entonces puede regresar, ¿está bien?
Sí, Abigail, regresas, ya salió.
Okay.
It was Gemini.
Maybe. And Franco, you can start anytime after de Jocelyn hacer la abertura de la actividad de hoy. ¿Ok? Jocelyn, es contigo.
Muy bien. Boa tarde, good afternoon y buenas tardes. Para todos ustedes, un saludo desde Perú, en nuestro tercer día de Boys Children Nursing. Muy contenta de estar participando y agradeciéndole a la doctora Ivonne Cabral, quien es nuestra mentora, nuestra coordinadora de investigación de la Red Internacional de Salud Infantil, y a todo el equipo de Boys Children Nursing, quien lidera Franco Carnevale, por el gran apoyo y sobre todo por todas las enseñanzas impartidas. Muy obrigada. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Jocelyn. Creo que, por favor, las personas que están con su sistema de traducción, si estás listo, hay un señal, una mancita como esta, si estás bien como eso, o se necesita de alguna orientación especial. ¿Ok? Entonces, vamos. Franco, good afternoon for everybody. Good evening for most of us that we are here. And then we have Franco Carnevale again for the presentation in the third day. And after his presentation, I prepare some connection between Franco's theory. I'm saying that, Franco's Carnevale theory of voice framework, and Paulo Freire. Maybe we will do this connection when we integrated one theoretical referential and the Franco's referential. Franco, it's yours now.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for everyone to come again after 2 difficult webinars. From my side today, my presentation is going to be more simple. It's going to be a little bit more technical. It's not conceptually complicated, and I want to keep it short so that we have time to hear Ivonne's reflections, because I think it is important to make connections with the project and Latin American nursing research and practice. So I will try to keep this short. Next slide, please. So we talked about theory, we have talked about methodology. Today I will talk briefly about data analysis, and I say briefly because it's very technical and very boring. So I just want to describe the method that we have developed within Voice. And Ivonne has also asked me to add a few comments about knowledge mobilization. Next slide, please. So data analysis. When we talk about data analysis and qualitative research, the approach needs to be oriented by the methodology that you are using. And in general, when we are using grounded theory or phenomenology, the data analysis, we say, should go from the bottom up. It's very important in grounded theory as well as phenomenology to not impose a theoretical framework. In grounded theory, the theory is to be generated through induction and analysis from the data. the theory comes from the ground at the bottom and then it goes upward. In phenomenology, it's incredibly important to suspend and to put in brackets theoretical pre-assumptions and to not bring them into your analysis. On the other hand, ethnography is quite different, and ethnography, with its long history in anthropology and in sociology, historically is considered to be a methodology that is oriented by theory. So for example, if you're doing an ethnography on stigmatization, stigmatization cannot be studied unless you have a stigma theoretical framework. Stigmatization is generated socially through social norms that establish what values what human qualities are valued and which ones are devalued. And then we see the ways in which people operate within a social space to conceal or reveal their qualities. So stigmatization, the study on stigmatization requires a theoretical framework. So similarly, for participatory hermeneutic ethnography, as it is in ethnography, it is oriented by a theoretical framework. Next slide, please. And so the theoretical framework that orients participatory hermeneutic ethnography is childhood ethics, which we spoke a lot about in the first webinar. And so with regards to the analysis, if we take each part of the methodology, participatory, for the analysis to be truly, respectfully participatory, then we need to design our analysis with a component, with a commitment to young people participating within the analysis, either as advisors, which is the lowest level of participation, as co-researchers, and sometimes as the lead researchers, where faculty people like us will then be methodological advisors, but the youth are actually driving the analysis because they have established what results are the ones that are most valued for them. In terms of the hermeneutic component of the analysis, a key feature of hermeneutic analysis is to continually zoom back and forth between small parts and the whole, small parts and the whole. Small parts for this methodology is really getting at moral experiences, expression of agency, and really eliciting voices that we can understand thickly, understand voices in terms of the social practices within which the child lives. And in order to do that thick interpretation of young people's voices, we need to examine the broader socio-political context by analyzing horizons of significance and social imaginaries, which I described several times in the first two webinars. And then the ethnographic component, which I described in the last seminar, the valued approach in ethnographic analysis is thick description. That is, you take your analysis and you're continually analyzing it in terms of local, social, cultural, political understandings, existing structures, social structures, norms and values, beliefs, to help you make sense of the data that is being generated, how to interpret a silence, how to interpret a facial expression that is always culturally and socially embedded. And so therefore, we need to analyze our data through that kind of thick description. So in order to do an analysis where you can go into the parts and do the whole, go into the parts and go into the whole, you need a methodology, a method for analyzing your data that allows you to go into parts, into wholes. Next slide, please. And so we have developed our an analytical method, and I want to tell you the best way to understand our approach to analysis is to see it in action. And I think this article here is probably our biggest study. Our goal in this study here on the slide is to understand moral experiences in the everyday lives of children in primary school and in secondary school. There's a lot of data, participant observation, interviews, materials, diaries, and so on. And so we have a very, very detailed demonstration of how we applied the analytical methods I am about to describe. And if you do go look at this article, pay special attention to what you see at the top here, supplementary materials. There are additional documents where you can sort of see the way in which we structured our analysis in more detail. Next slide, please. After many, many years of doing our data analysis and many, many, many students, master students, PhD students, postdoctoral trainees, we got to a point where we said, well, we have to publish this method because it is very repetitive to keep teaching each student one at a time. We really need to develop this and publish it. And so this article presents our analytical method that we use in Voice. We published it as a general qualitative analysis method. It can be used for other methodologies, we believe. We are contacted by many people who are using it and are really appreciating it. It's complex, but it's really quite simple, and I hope you're going to like it. And I want to tell you, one of the authors here, Kevin Liu, was a member of our Youth Advisory Council. Again, trying to really practice that commitment to youth engagement in all aspects of the work we do. And Kevin participated by sharing some of his own data analysis, and it's incorporated into the article. So if you go to the article, there are lots and lots of demonstrations of everything that I'm about to describe. And some of the images you're going to see in the next slides are directly from the article. So next slide, please. So keep in mind always, the goal here is to have a data analysis method that allows you to zoom into the little parts and go to the whole. So look at the way in which we've designed that. So analysis starts with coding. So coding is usually familiar to every qualitative researcher. It's where you really go at all of the individual words, every bit of data in interviews, in participant observation, policies, documents, whatever it is you're going to analyze. You're going to analyze it word for word, sentence for sentence, and you're going to code it. And I'm going to describe that in just a moment. The codes will then be categorized, the ones that are similar to each other, in order to allow you to create themes. First, we create small themes, micro themes, with a little bit of codes in each one. And then micro themes that are similar to each other get grouped together to create a meso theme. So it's a bit of a bigger theme. So this is thematic analysis. I am sure that everybody here has already done this and knows what that means. So it's very similar to what you've seen before. But our worry about thematic analysis is that it becomes very reductionistic. You break down complex experiences, individual experiences, moral experiences, as well as social context into little pieces. It becomes very reductionistic, and we're concerned about the whole. And so we've introduced these two other steps that are syntheses. And so for step 4, once you've done all your thematic analysis, you need to create a narrative synthesis. You basically tell the story that uses all of the themes, and you explain the way in which the themes are related to each other by telling your story. And the narrative synthesis is telling the story of one unit of analysis. A unit of analysis is important to specify. A unit of analysis could be one participant. It could be a group, it could be a family. It could be a classroom. You need to decide this at the onset, because then the unit of analysis, you're going to take all of the data within that unit of analysis and integrate them into a narrative synthesis. And then the final step is, we call it a synthesis of syntheses. So it's basically doing a transversal analysis of all of these narratives of step 4 and looking for patterns as well as unique differences and telling a longer story that really integrates all of these narratives. And that is essentially, by then, you have your results. That last transversal synthesis is essentially the last part of your results. And then the first part is the presentation of all the themes that you identified with quotes and so on. Next slide, please. So in this slide, it's a graphic presentation of those 5 steps. So on the left is the coding. So data unit 1, the first 2 green ones are both from data unit 1. For example, the first one, so data unit or unit of analysis. So the first green box is your coding of an interview. The second green box is the coding of your field notes from participant observation. So they are related to each other. They're from the same unit of analysis. It could be one child, for example, that you are talking to and that you are observing them in different parts of their lives. So you do the coding of all of the data for that unit. In this case, let's say it's a child. And then you generate micro themes. So we're going to the right now. And then the micro themes get grouped into similar ones, into meso themes. And then we generate a narrative synthesis, which is the third oval on the right there. It's a narrative synthesis of just that unit of analysis. And then at the very end, when we have all of these done for every unit of analysis, we do the last step, the big blue oval, and that is a cross synthesis of all the syntheses. Next slide, please. We, many years ago, decided, when I did my first PhD and I finished it in 1994, I was trained using software to do coding and to do qualitative analysis. I was trained by sociologists, and it was I felt really cool. Hey, I'm using software, and I thought it gave me extra credibility. But then these systems kept changing. Every few years, there's a new generation of software, and I found each student I found that students got distracted in learning how to use the software technically, and they were not learning the analytical, the mental analytical processes involved with data analysis. And so a few years ago, we decided to we stopped with all of that, and we only use Word. All of our analysis is done with Word. Pretty simple. Everybody knows how to use Word, and we use the comment balloons. So this is an example of, you have an interview, and then you have answers. And so within the answers there, I'm not going to go into the details here because it's too fine detail, and I'd rather have a discussion with Yvonne after. So that'll be more interesting. But so we have two types of codes. We have S codes and A codes. An S code is something that everybody's familiar with, and it's basically a summary statement of the data. So we asked, for example, we're in a study of trying to understand young people's moral agency in their everyday life. How does someone your age make a decision between what's right and wrong? The interviewer asked. And so the answers include, at least for me, I think good decisions are the decisions that make you happy. I don't know how the rest of my age group thinks, but at least for me, it's like, what's going to make me happy? What's going to make, not just me happy, what's going to make other people happy too? So already you're starting to see a new point here. What's the best possible outcome? So now looking at outcomes, but definitely what is going to make me happy? I don't want to be a scientist, but that's not going to make me happy. That's going to make me stressed, and I'm going to hate my job. Doesn't want to be a scientist. So, you're really demonstrating the reflections that the young person is making. And then, so with each point, we write an S code. An S code is a summary statement of each point that they make. Now, because ethnography requires you to be explicit about your analytical reasoning right from the beginning, we have introduced A codes. So when you write an S code, you also, when you can, write an A code. An A code is an analytical code. So you are writing, what do you think this means? So basically the A code, the first one is the participant thinks that a good decision is determined by bringing happiness to self. So that's a little interpretation, a micro conclusion that you have made. And this is useful because when we are coding, we're always nervous about bringing our own voice into the voice of the participant, which we're not supposed to do. We're supposed to try to be, in coding, make a distinction between description and interpretation. So an S code really tries you to be true to what you're seeing or hearing. And then the A code allows you to bring in, what do you think is going on here? And these A codes allow you to start formulating some hypotheses about what do you think is going on. It will help you be self-conscious about your interpretations. And it might help you generate some hypotheses that you will then bring forward into ongoing data generation, new interviews, new observations. Next slide, please. So I'm going to skip this one. This is just another example of coding, S coding and A coding. So next slide, please. And then so I'm going to skip this one too. It's just more examples of S coding and A coding. So you have, and all of these are in the article, as well as in the slides, which you'll have access to. And so here is where we started grouping those codes, the S codes and the A codes. So here we have a micro theme that is called condemning while trying to understand and explain racism. So this was based on other data where young people are trying to express themselves and their views regarding racism. And so we had groups of codes that we put together. So we had some that are in group 1, some that are in group 2, group 3, and group 4, and all of them corresponded with this theme of condemning while trying to understand and explain racism. So we've got a temporary title, that's the micro theme. We've got all these codes that we've now put them together. We took them from the transcript where we made all our S and A codes. We put them into a column here, and so now we've got a first micro theme that we're working with. Next slide, please. And then as we keep going forward, within one unit of analysis, we have identified several micro themes. Condemning while trying to explain and understand racism, caring about standing up for others, sometimes more than for yourself, creating a forum for her peers to express themselves during a crisis, and so on. So we've got a bunch of micro themes that we have identified based on the codes that we have been grouping. Next slide, please. And then we start to create mesothemes by taking certain micro themes that go together, and we create a bigger theme for the ones that do fit together. And so in this particular body of data, they were all relating to the participants' views on maturity, which is quite interesting, hearing young people talk about maturity. And so we put all the micro themes that have to do with that. And now we've got this meso theme called Gauging Minors' Maturity. Next slide, please. And this is what a narrative synthesis looks like. So usually a narrative synthesis is for a unit of analysis. So it could be one participant, could be a family, it could be a group of young people and that are somehow connected with each other. And we write a document that could be 2 to 5 pages single-spaced. One of the rules we have is your synthesis has to include all of the themes that you identified within that unit of analysis. And in this case, the themes are in bold, so they stand out. So you can sort of see the way the summary is written is, this was a research on young people regarding medical assistance in dying, euthanasia. This was actually conducted by Kevin, the youth. By the way, Kevin was 18 years old when he joined Voice. He was a high school student. And he came to us for us to teach him how to do research and how to analyze, because he wanted to do his own research. He was the first author on some publications as well, and he's a co-author on SAMMSA. And so this is a narrative synthesis where you present, you tell a story of all that you found for that one unit of analysis, but you include all of the themes. So the whole, you're being careful about not making a big interpretive leap and going into areas that are not connected to the data. And the way we do that is making sure that all of the themes are basically orienting the synthesis. And I think there might be one more slide on this. No, that's it. That's SAMMSA. I really encourage you to read those 2 papers. Read the SAMMSA paper that describes all the procedures, and then read the school ethnography, because it's really, 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 really rich. It's a huge study. It took us a long, I'm not going to tell you because I don't want to discourage anyone. It took us a long time to do all the analysis. But I believe you will find it helpful. Now, I'm going to move right on to knowledge mobilization, and I won't invite a discussion because that way I can finish and we can hear from everyone. Is that okay, Bonnie? I'll just keep going.
Okay, keep going.
Okay.
And we'll discuss after.
Okay, so knowledge mobilization. Yvonne asked me to add this, and Yvonne's asked me to present about knowledge mobilization several times in Rio and in different places. And so let me explain what this is. And I'm very proud to talk about knowledge mobilization because Canadian researchers have been pretty serious leaders. I'm not saying I am, but many people in Canada have done a lot of the very important work of pushing forward this idea that research has a responsibility not only to create knowledge, but also to ensure that that knowledge is utilized. There are 2 big and different approaches to knowledge utilization. The most famous one, and not the one that we use in Voice, and I will make the difference, is the most famous one is knowledge translation. Knowledge translation is especially big in medical research, because when you develop scientific knowledge on how to do an investigation, how to interpret an investigation, how to prescribe a medication, how to do a certain procedure, the flow of the utilization of the knowledge usually has one direction, from the knowledge producer to the knowledge user. The scientist creates some knowledge, and then you want people to apply it. Next slide, please. And Ian Graham, who is Canadian, is internationally renowned for really advancing this work on knowledge translation. And so he has developed a framework. Next slide actually is better. It's the same schematic, but it's a little bit visually nicer. So that the upside down triangle is the knowledge creation process, where you're conducting an inquiry, you synthesize results, and you generate certain outputs. And then the circle around it is the knowledge utilization process. It's really making sure that the knowledge is then put into action and continuously reevaluated. And in that process, you might generate new questions for ongoing research. So this is knowledge translation. It is generally unidirectional. There is a new version of this that is called integrated KT, integrated knowledge translation, that is building more of a reciprocal relationship between knowledge production, knowledge utilization. But I want to move on to knowledge mobilization. Next slide, please. So in Canada, knowledge mobilization is the knowledge utilization framework that is used within social sciences, and it is therefore the one that we have been using within Voice, mainly because we are using a lot of social sciences methodologies and theories, and also a lot of our financing comes from social sciences research bodies. And so knowledge mobilization, you have the definition right there. So by this Social Sciences Research Council, it's the reciprocal and complementary flow and uptake of research knowledge between researchers, knowledge brokers, and knowledge users, both within and beyond academia, in such a way that may benefit users and create positive impacts within Canada and or internationally, like NC, internationally, and ultimately has the potential to enhance the profile, reach, and impact of social sciences and humanities research. Next slide, please. And so when we are designing knowledge mobilization strategies within a study, we have to, and by the way, in Canada, you really cannot get research funding without a very solid section in your proposal on knowledge mobilization for social sciences and knowledge translation for medical science. It is a strong value by the funding agencies in Canada that if you don't say what could be done, say what you will do within this grant to make sure that the knowledge is going to be used. So for knowledge mobilization, we have to describe outputs, outcomes, and impacts that will be generated during the life cycle of a particular study. Impacts are usually longer term, and so those are things that will be then monitored after. But the outputs and the outcomes are more short and medium term mobilizations that we're expected to put into action. This is increasingly also very much a part of doctoral student training in Canada, where as part of a PhD, you need to really learn about knowledge mobilization methods and integrate that into your proposals. Next slide, please. So with all of that said, how can we do this in childhood research, and in particular children's nursing research? We need to discuss that, and we need to plan it for this project altogether. So I'm going to just give you some of the examples of what we have done within Voice. So in the early years, we were still learning what this knowledge mobilization thing is and how do you do it. And so in the earlier years, we were using just very traditional approaches to knowledge utilization. Next slide, please. So for example, the most common thing, and it's still important, and that's academic and scientific papers. So we publish a lot of things, we talk a lot of things, we do posters at conferences. All of that is important, and it remains important because it's crucial way of really verifying the value of the knowledge that you're producing through critique. So publication is very important. Peer review really helps criticize the quality of the work. Next slide, please. So just to give you an example, I think this was from my first or second I think, second talk webinar. Our website, we have all of our publications there, and most of them are open access so that you can access them. And so this is an example of knowledge mobilization, dissemination. You just keep shooting it out there. Just push it out there, push it out there. Next slide. That's not enough, though. That's important. It's necessary, but not sufficient. The next thing that we did from early on was engagement with clinical settings as well as public settings. So clinical presentations meant that we went around presenting our results to clinical teams, clinics, departments, in hospitals, and so on. So this is just an example of things we did with our very our first study where voice started in 2006. This was research on children. This is how I think I met Ivone, because she knew we did this research on children living at home with assisted respiration. And so this was published in 2006. And so we published a lot on it. We went around and presented this in different hospitals. But then we also went into the popular media. Who is that young guy in the top right of that slide? I wonder who that is. That can't be Franco, because that looks like a whole other person with a head of hair. But anyway, this is an example of an article in the popular newspapers. We did a lot of that. We were on radio, on television. On the bottom part on the right, you see a booklet that we made. Back then, we made booklets that were paper. And so it was an information booklet for clinicians, and we made another one for families, where we took our results and the quotations from families in order to help clinicians and families have a dialogue about having a child go home with a tracheostomy, a respirator, and so on. And we also participated in policy making whenever there was an opportunity. Next slide, please. So that was a lot of our early approaches. But in the most recent years, we've been really exploding. And I think knowledge mobilization is our most exciting work. It's our most innovative. And I want to tell you, this is the part where our youth are really interested. Like, they're somewhat interested in knowledge creation, but they are really interested in taking the knowledge that is generated and then running with it. Really, even today, I had a meeting with some youth on a project that they have in mind. So first of all, so nowadays we think of knowledge mobilization always with partners. Next slide, please. So I'm curious to know what this network at this meeting today, who do we envision as our partners? These are some of the partners that Voice is working with. If you go on our website, there's going to be over 40 different types of partners. But these are partners that we're working with probably, like every week, or even more than once a week. At least 3 of those I've worked with just this week, and it's only Wednesday. So these are partners where they generate ideas for doing research, and we go with them to look at how to mobilize research results. And sometimes we start with them because they know us. And so if we want to develop something that we want to mobilize in a school, we might go into one of these organizations and to try it out first so that it's more refined, and then mobilize it within schools. Next slide, please. How do we mobilize research in order to generate clinical innovations? And this is a big part of what we are doing. We are working with clinical partners to really have a reciprocal exchange and challenge thinking about. Just this morning, I was doing some teaching in with a youth protection team on how do we think about protection. How do we protect children in a way that doesn't harm them, that doesn't erase their voice, that hears what they are concerned about in terms of being returned back into their family? That was just today. So we are continually working with clinical partners on how do we reimagine consent, assent, capacity to participate, privacy, confidentiality. How do we reimagine the way in which we use control measures like restraints, and being aware of the harms and the traumas that we could be causing? Next slide, please. And so, for example, we have very extensive partnerships within child and youth mental health services. And so, for example, next slide, please. Over the years, we have worked together to create a framework for clinical ethics decision-making in child and youth mental health. The framework is many pages. So these are just a few of the key steps that we have identified that is informed by a lot of the work that we are doing on this idea of best interests and young people's capacity to participate. So that line, does the child have the capacity to provide consent or assent? Well, the research that we do, you and me, not just me, but you too, is going to help to reveal the ways in which young people can have the capacity, or they can be assisted to strengthen their capacity to participate in these kinds of discussions. Next slide, please. I work in a pediatric hospice where we are currently working together to look at some current research that we've done on childhood grief. And we have integrated our international work group. I spoke about this before. We have integrated a wide body of research to show that this idea of protecting children from the words cancer or the words death is harmful, it's isolating, it's very distressing. And so in working in this pediatric hospice, we are day-to-day developing methods for how to talk to a child about these difficult topics. We can use play, we could use drawings, we can use art, sometimes music, variety of strategies that we are continually trying to develop to help mobilize this knowledge about children's grief. Next slide, please. Argyris Michalis is one of the professors on the voice team, and she's specialized on osteogenesis imperfecta. Probably most of you know what that is, but it's when the bones are very fragile and they fracture. They could fracture several times a day sometimes. And so through research that we've been doing with children at the Shriners Hospital, which is a specialized hospital on bone diseases, she's been developing a number of materials, including YouTube videos, as well as coloring books, and and I thought for sure Carnaval would be an important one for a Latin American, Brazilian audience, and as well when your presenter is called Carnavale. Also within that team, next slide please, we have developed some really, really innovative approaches. And this one is one that I'm really proud of, where Carl Williams, who is a professional musician as well as a nurse, while he was doing his master's and worked with children with osteogenesis imperfecta, he was inspired to create a song that would tell their story, that would tell the story that they want told. And so using the methods that we've been discussing in these webinars, he had a series of meetings of children with osteogenesis imperfecta, and he bit by bit created the story. He played it to them, got their feedback, and then developed this whole, the story that is called "Oh, I Will Rise Again." So OI stands for osteogenesis imperfecta, but in English it means oh me, I will rise again. And the story goes, the song goes, where my bones may break, but my spirit will never break. I will rise again. And the story is very powerful, and he has played it several times at meetings of children and families with osteogenesis imperfecta, and they really feel very inspired, and they feel like their fight and their struggle to be recognized as humans and not as broken bodies, because that's one of the struggles they have, is that they're just treated as broken bodies and not as full human beings with hopes and aspirations. And when I was in Rio, I played the song in a seminar that we did there. I cannot play it here because this is recorded and because of copyright protection. So whenever we are on a, I do have, of course, it's our product, and I would play it if we are in a classroom, but I cannot play it on a webinar like this. Next slide, please. And I'm almost at the end. And then also working with community organizations. So next slide, please. So one community organization is called the Welcome Home Mission. This is an organization that works with families living in poverty, and the majority of these families are children who are new immigrants to Canada. And so on the bottom left hand there, you see a document where we have created a bunch of materials for children and other materials like that for parents to help children and families talk about the stress of being here, the stress of migration, the stress of going to a school and being different, the risks of bullying, and how to learn about a right way to respond to bullying, a right way for the parents to respond to the child. And in a couple of weeks' time, we will be having a big event, and I will be there with the voice team. And normally we will meet about 900 children, and almost like over 95% of them they speak a different language. And so Amanda will be there, who you met. Amanda Cervantes will be there speaking to the Spanish-speaking families and Spanish-speaking children. And our goal is to really sensitize them to the stresses of children's everyday life. And then we have a little spot in the corner where we do private, quick consultations to see if a family needs some follow-up. And we have been building a social pediatrics clinic there. Right now we have a pediatrician, and pretty soon we will hire a nurse practitioner. And we have been developing a nursing service there for these families. Next slide, please. And I'm going to go very fast now. And then we've done something similar with an organization called Love. And this is for young people who are experiencing violence and other mental health challenges, where we are helping these organizations develop programs in their work with youth. Next slide, please. Go out there and see when there's opportunities to work with community organizations. Bloom is a highly respected parent and child and youth group living with disability, where they have a blog where they discuss with each other new findings, new literature. And I was asked to participate in an interview to describe agency. Again, this is just for the regular public, right? This is not academic. And I've been there many times to provide those kinds of commentaries. And I know that many of you do that as well. This is so valuable to connect with the communities. Next slide, please. And then, of course, taking the knowledge that we produce and making sure that we use it right now, every day in our teaching. This is where we can have immediate impact, where we all have power, because a lot of us are instructors or professors, either in a hospital or in a clinic or in a university or other organization, where we can immediately change the way in which we are preparing clinicians for the future, preparing nurses. Next slide, please. So, for example, based on our research on the harms of the ways in which pediatric dentistry is practiced, and many pediatric dentists are practicing very aggressive restraining procedures to hold down a child when a procedure is being done, that clearly is incredibly traumatic. We are working with our pediatric dentistry department at McGill University, the director of whom is a Brazilian. She's a Brazilian dentist who's the director of pediatric dentistry at McGill University. And so she loves this work, and we have been doing presentations together to try to transform practices. Next slide, please. And then to go back to where we started. Of course, we need to take all of this and integrate it into nursing. And you've already seen this article. You have access to it. This is my attempt to articulate all of these ideas into how we can reimagine nursing practice. Next slide, please. A really important component of this that I'm very excited about is developing Indigenous children's nursing. So next slide, please. And I'm including this because I know that in many Latin American countries, nursing engagements with Indigenous communities is an important part of the work, and they are often the only or very important healthcare providers with Indigenous communities. And so we have developed a whole curriculum that is available online. But see, the link is at the bottom of the slide. We have worked on this for years, and we still are. We've been working with Indigenous youth advisors as well as Indigenous leaders to develop a curriculum. And we have developed a Indigenous, non-Indigenous partnership model. I am non-Indigenous, and my responsibility is to promote decolonization as part of taking responsibility as a settler, as a non-Indigenous person associated with colonization, to take responsibility to do everything I can to confront ongoing colonizations. For example, the ways in which many professionals are interpreting best interests is almost always passing judgment on the ways in which some Indigenous families raise their children, where in fact the care of children could be much more distributed within a community, for instance, and I don't want to generalize. So decolonization, this is important to think about this partnership. Decolonization partnered with indigenization. And indigenization is contributed by Indigenous leaders. And we really need to be important that we don't appropriate, the non-Indigenous people don't appropriate Indigenous experiences, and that we become teachers and experts in Indigenous nursing. I have worked as a nurse in Indigenous communities, in many different communities, and I have experience with it, but it's not my place to say what is good Indigenous children's nursing. So that's the partnership, decolonization, indigenization. I am worried that in some settings, the way this is being operationalized is that, well, the Indigenous people are the leaders, but then they feel abandoned. They don't have power and influence in colonial structures like universities. And that's why this kind of partnership can be really fantastically rich and powerful. Next slide, please. So, and in this work, as anybody who knows Franco knows that Franco loves frameworks. I'm always making frameworks. This is my mission. And so we've developed a framework for Indigenous children's nursing, and it's all explained in depth in the link that you see at the bottom of the slide. And I'm almost at the end. Next slide, please. And we talked about participation. So knowledge mobilization, we need to always be mindful of who are we talking about here? We're talking about young people. And we need to be careful about not taking over and becoming paternalistic with good intentions to mobilize knowledge in ways that maybe doesn't serve their interests and doesn't meet their priorities. And to remember that young people's agency has a political dimension. Next slide, please. And so in our partnership, it's important that we have partnerships with youth groups. And so these are many, we have our own youth advisory council. I am curious to know how all of you see these kinds of youth partnerships developing within this project. We have Indigenous youth advisors. And then there are specialized youth councils that we work with directly when we want to talk about neurodiversity or mental health or disability, for example. Next slide, please. And as I said before, working with our youth advisors, we have been on a campaign to change the practices of the Canadian Journal of Public Health to advocate for ensuring that when papers are submitted to that journal, and we're now going to other journals, and we have another journal that has responded. I won't name it, but they said they will follow this practice, where the, next slide, please. So that journal has in fact changed its policy now, Canadian Journal of Public Health, and is going to require from authors to explain how were young people participants in this research. And our first goal, of course, is to at least make sure that children are even involved in the research, like that they are participants and that we don't have adults speaking on behalf of their experience. Next slide, please. But again, it's also thinking about how young people can be researchers. So as I said, Kevin, he was 18 years old. He was in high school when he joined Voice, and he published this article in a very, very important journal, Children and Society. And he was concerned about the movement and euthanasia. Next slide. Next. There. The legislation on medical assistance in dying, which is euthanasia in Canada, and how young people haven't been involved in any discussions, and the policy doesn't make this service available to them. And so he conducted focus groups. He did all the analysis, but with professors guiding him and coaching him and teaching him. So much was this was so respected. In the next slide please. He was invited to speak to the Canadian Parliament, make a testimony on the results of his research, because Canadian Parliament called me to say, what do you think should be the change in legislation? And so I said, well, first step is you shouldn't have called me, you should be speaking with youth. Can you recommend a youth? So he went there, he did such a fantastic testimony. And I am very sure that as a result of this testimony, next slide, we were given a very big grant from the Canadian government to now do a Canada-wide study on youth engagement, to really look at how to promote the engagement of young people on research on end-of-life, palliative care, and so on. Big grant. I won't even say the amount because I'm almost embarrassed. It's so big. Next slide, please. Similarly, we've been given this other big grant that I've talked to you about, where we're looking at not only at end of life, but in all realms on how to promote youth engagement. So as much as I keep talking about youth engagement, we really don't have much knowledge how to do it. And all I can do is share my experience. I'm curious to know what your experience is, but we need to sort of share each other's expertise to see what we find works. Next slide, please. On this slide, I'm not going to go into the details, but on that big grant that we just got in the previous slide, these are all the knowledge mobilization promises that we made. So this will give you an idea to see how today we are thinking about knowledge mobilization. These are the promises we made. We're going to write policy briefs. We're going to develop education programs for service providers. We're going to develop workshops with and for young people. And by the way, the principal investigators on this grant are professors as well as our youth advisory council. We got the grant together. We're doing this research together. We're going to develop social media. It's not going to be this guy who's going to be developing the social media. It's going to be youth driven. And then we're going to do the academic things, publications and so on. Next slide, please. So I'm at the end. I've led 3 webinars. I presented what I have to share. This is all I know. This is all I have to say. I want to hear from the rest of you. And so in closing, I want to just remind you a couple of points from my webinars. Next slide, please. If we go back to the very, very first webinar, my first slide was this one, where I introduced what I think is the key problem that, and this is the problem that drives me, epistemological oppression. I am convinced that the ways in which we think about young people and the way in which we think about immaturity, young people have to be protected because they're incapable, incompetent, is harmful. It is generating trauma. And a lot of that, in English, we say insidious trauma. It's invisible. It's operating all the time. It is humiliating them. It makes them feel like what they think, what they feel, and what their experience is meaningless. I find this, I am restless. I lose sleep over this, and it's with me all the time. And it's why I forgot to retire several years ago when I should have retired. And I see that the work of this work that we're doing, this research, as well as the advances we make in children's nursing, is aimed towards liberation, emancipation, confronting together, using the same model of decolonization, indigenization, but using the model of adults and youth leaders, where we are the faculty experts and the youth are going to be experts on their experiences, working together to help confront this. Next slide. Remembering that they have rights, that everything that is done should be based on their best interests, but best interest is often manipulated and used in ways that is very uninformed. And I think the research that we are planning here with this team can really help to reveal the everyday experiences of children so that they can tell us what their interests are. And in particular, we're going to develop methods in the research that we do that will help us also respect Article 12, where we will respect their voices. We will develop techniques to help generate, make them feel safe to speak, hear where their voices are, and have those voices inform their best interests. Next slide, please. Why are we doing all of this? I was very inspired by this work by Duncan Randall. In 2016, he published this book on the need for children's nursing, the need for really making children's nursing a separate thing. And I read his quote, "Trying to adapt adult conceptual frameworks and nursing theories to children is not only problematic and nonsensical, but also damaging to children." And let me pause here. I don't know about where you work. In my university and many universities, we take general nursing theories or models and we apply them to everybody. And we basically just treat children as if they are the same as adults. He is arguing we need childhood-specific theories and models that understand childhood. I will continue. In that these adult adapted approaches do not facilitate children's access to a childhood. In effect, the omission of any aspect of childhood is to suggest that children do not need to experience a childhood. This denial of children's access to a childhood is a denial of their basic human right to grow and develop within a community. This has driven a lot of the work that we've been doing. Next slide, please. This inspired me to go on and write this article, to take the work that we're doing and try to articulate a vision for children's nursing that is informed by the ideas that I've been presenting here on agency, best interests, moral experience, and so on. And ultimately, next slide, and the final slide, let us all remember, when we talk about participation, we talk about participation everywhere, not only for research generation, but research mobilization in the governance of our structures, in our institutions, in developing policies, and remembering this incredible movement in participation. And this is my overture to Freire and Yvonne, nothing about us without us. Be very careful about the temptation to be paternalistic with young people. When we, with very good intention, want to protect them, we many times are oppressing them. Last slide, next slide. I thank you.
Franco, you are amazing. And I feel like I have somebody who can amplify my voice in a different way of expressing how we need to respect the children, how we need to consider children as a citizen, as a moral agent, as a person who can speak for themselves. They need to have a way to communicate and to express the feeling and the needs by themselves. You know what I mean? So I think that's very, very insightful for our research project. And now I think that it would be, I don't know if it's okay if I just made some comments in my presentation. It's a short presentation because I would like to hear from people, and I would like to put some connection between what you are saying in the 3 days and what we have to do in Latin American work with one philosophy. I would say the Paulo Freire philosophy for decolonizing, because my concern is, like you said, we need to decolonize some theoretical framework, and sometimes this framework could be very integrated to the context we are living, but we need sometimes to do some adjust, to think about this approach as a guide for conducting research, interpreting the data. I think that we need to do both. So now eu change for them to speak em português. Agora eu vou mudar para falar em português e pedir às pessoas que estão aqui para poder mudar a tradução para o espanhol, ok? Os que não são português, a audiência de falante em português, para modificar aí para espanhol, ok? É muito curta a apresentação, até porque é uma aproximação, uma tentativa de aproximação com o que a gente tem pensado sobre o papel da criança como cidadão, numa perspectiva freiriana. Então, o projeto estrutura Voice Children Nursing na produção e mobilização de conhecimento com e sobre o cuidado de crianças latino-americanas com condições crônicas, necessidades de saúde especiais e complexas. Nada sobre nós sem nós. Eu acho que a última frase que o Franco projetou expressa a preocupação que nós estamos tendo com esse projeto. Não só produzir, mas também mobilizar esse conhecimento. E é por isso que, nesses dias, por isso eu solicitei ao Franco que falasse um pouco sobre as estratégias de Knowledge Mobilization, para que a gente também possa pensar numa articulação dos produtos, os resultados, com a disseminação desse conhecimento. Então, nós temos um elenco de universidades que estão participando do projeto, e o objetivo principal é integrar a estrutura do Voice Children's Nursing, que é a enfermagem, em saúde da criança, a produção, tradução, porque tem um componente biomédico no projeto, e tem um componente das ciências sociais, da mobilização do conhecimento sobre esse cuidado às crianças latino-americanas. Então, como que a gente pensou nesse processo? Como que a gente está pensando em discutir com o grupo a contextualização desse framework para a América Latina? Baseado na ideia de que nós precisamos decolonizar a infância do norte global. Então, não é transladar ou traduzir uma estrutura teórica para a América Latina, sem que a gente repense o contexto da América Latina, Então, esse contexto, a gente está pensando numa ideia de trabalhar a integração baseada na filosofia freiriana. Paulo Freire, quando defendeu, né, a integração e não a adaptação, ele pensou na inclusão como um sistema maior, ou seja, existe a ideia de que deve-se manter as características e as identidades originais, no caso, a característica do povo latino-americano e a identidade original da América Latina, com a sua interculturalidade, as suas diferentes culturas. Integrar aqui no sentido de transformar esse conceito, aplicando ao contexto, e esse contexto de culturas diferentes. E dentro de uma lógica de um processo de mudança que é libertador da opressão. E aí traz essa ideia da opressão como algo que silencia, que diminui a existência, que inferioriza. Então, nós temos que rever esses nossos conceitos em relação à infância e à juventude para nós mesmos nos decolonizar daquilo que foi internalizado no processo de nossa formação profissional. Então, por meio de um processo consciente, dialógico e participação ativa de todos. E aí traz para a gente uma nova cosmovisão da infância, da adolescência e da juventude, para além do modelo biomédico, né? Então, pensar isso, essa estrutura dessa forma. A cosmovisão aqui, baseando-se na filosofia freiriana, é a forma como nós vemos e interpretamos o mundo. Os nossos valores e crenças que estão impregnados no nosso existir e modelam as nossas atitudes e orientam os nossos pressupostos que nós formulamos sobre a nossa realidade. E ele envolve nessa cosmovisão com ideias e de sentimentos que vão modelando aí a maneira como nós somos, né? Como pessoas, e nós nos relacionamos com esse mundo e tomamos decisões. Então, vem aí, baseado nessa perspectiva de decolonialidade, né? Decolonialidade das teorias de enfermagem, de uma cultura única latino-americana, de uma cultura única no Brasil. A gente tem que romper com essa ideia da cultura única e pensar nas diferentes culturas. Integrar o Voice Children's Nursing para crianças e jovens da América Latina, entender essa estrutura como uma orientação interpretativa geral. Essa orientação interpretativa, o Franco tem falado ao longo desses 3 dias, é uma determinação daquilo que é singular e importante na perspectiva da criança, uma integração contínua das múltiplas dimensões que configuram a experiência dessa criança, desse jovem, não só a biológica, mas a relacional, a social e a ética. E um esforço constante para que se evoque formas de se expressar e dessa criança e desse jovem se comunicar. E que a gente possa capturar, né, as múltiplas formas de expressão, as múltiplas formas de manifestação da criança e converter isso em material para a pesquisa, para que a gente possa aprender mais com essa criança e esse jovem. E aí tem os princípios da pedagogia da infância freiriana, que é muito interessante, né, e que dialoga com a estrutura. O primeiro é a da dialogicidade e da politicidade. Franco falou isso o tempo todo, usando outras expressões, né? São as relações horizontais estabelecidas entre o pesquisador e essa criança. Aqui tem um princípio incorporado, que é o da horizontalidade. É a posição horizontal e reduzir ao máximo que a gente puder as relações de poder entre quem pesquisa, quem está na clínica e essa criança, para se aproximar dessas formações imaginárias, do mundo imaginário da criança. O mundo imaginário da criança, ele é imaginário para nós, mas ele é concreto para a criança. E isso exige um processo de transformação da consciência, migrando de uma consciência ingênua para uma consciência transitiva até a crítica. E a crítica aqui é da realidade social, é da crítica da realidade econômica, política, das múltiplas relações que se estabelecem no contexto, né? Isso é central no processo de educação freiriana. Então, o processo de educação na perspectiva de Freire, ele é modelado pela transição da consciência, pela mudança dos processos de consciência. E, obviamente, que isso é feito por um movimento de ação, reflexão e ação. E ele defende ainda uma coisa bem interessante que o Franco acabou de falar, que é a questão da ousadia e criatividade. Então, temos que ser criativos. Então, assim, o pesquisador criativo, ousado, ele vai criar estratégias de conexão com essa criança e esse jovem. E essa conexão faz com que, por exemplo, um jovem, como é o exemplo lá do Kevin Liu, ele desenvolve todos os procedimentos de pesquisa, ele analisa e depois ele mobiliza esse conhecimento e ele é escutado nos espaços de formulação de políticas públicas. Então, esse exige um processo de ousadia. É preciso ousar, o pesquisador ousar, para que esses processos emancipatórios e de empoderamento, eles ocorram. Então, há uma relação muito próxima dos pressupostos, né, do Framework in Children's Nursing e a filosofia freiriana, quando traz os processos emancipatórios e participativos, baseados em respeito e reconhecimento do lugar social ou da cosmovisão do outro. Então, aqui tem algumas memórias de Paulo Freire menino que eu trouxe para a gente compartilhar aqui com o grupo, né? Então, uma coisa que ele traz da experiência dele em Cartas a Cristina, esse livro eu recomendo, tá? Porque é uma autobiografia da infância de Paulo Freire. Então, ele faz reflexões sobre a minha vida e minha praxe, mas uma praxe de criança, tá? E aí eu trouxe 2 textos interessantes desse livro dele. Então, ele diz, nela, a infância, se interpenetravam 2 mundos que vivíamos intensamente. O mundo do brinquedo, em que meninos jogávamos futebol, nadávamos em rio, empinávamos papagaio, e o mundo em que, enquanto meninos, éramos, porém, homens antecipados. Então, a sociedade, às vezes, impõe para os meninos e as meninas homens e mulheres antecipadas. E as voltas com a nossa fome e a fome dos nossos. Então, ele mostra que a infância de pobreza que ele viveu, convivendo num ambiente de pobreza e de privação, e que se esperava dessas crianças, né, na sua prática, na sua praxe, como ele diz, né, na praxe de vida, homens antecipados enfrentando a fome e a miséria. Ele dizia, no fundo vivíamos, como já salientei, uma radical ambiguidade. Éramos meninos antecipados em gente grande. A nossa meninice ficava espremida entre o brinquedo e o trabalho, entre a liberdade e a necessidade de sobreviver, e ele trabalhando, né, as crianças que trabalhavam para sobreviver. Então, aqui, o que a gente observa, né, que é necessário, e ele traz isso na concepção da educação, quando ele foi secretário de saúde, secretário de educação do município de São Paulo, né, que é preciso mobilizar estratégias de processos participatórios e emancipatórios da infância e juventude para que essas jovens e crianças vivam o seu tempo de ser criança, tá? O tempo de ser criança e não antecipar como um adulto em miniatura. Então, ele traz outra coisa importante, né, que está no livro também dele, Por uma Pedagogia da Pergunta. Esse livro, ele e o Antônio Faundes, ele traz a ideia da criança oprimida, a criança silenciada, a criança que não pode indagar. Então, ele diz, creio que na tenra idade, que é da infância, começamos a negação autoritária da curiosidade. Então, como criança, né, a repressão à pergunta é uma dimensão apenas da repressão maior. A repressão ao ser inteiro, a sua expressividade em suas relações no mundo e com o mundo. Então, a criança aprende a silenciar. E aí ele diz, o que se pretende autoritariamente com o silêncio imposto, em nome da ordem, é exatamente afogar nele a indagação. Eu acho que é isso que a gente precisa romper. essa negação da criança como um agente moral. E essa criança oprimida que não tem possibilidade de se expressar porque nós mesmas não reconhecemos a potência, né, dessa criança e desse jovem para falar por si mesmo. Então, já finalizando, a gente sabe que o maior foco, né, dos estudos de Paulo Freire foi jovens e adultos. Mas como Paulo Freire pensou a infância, né, e aí eu trouxe o Corran, que o Franco tanto falou nos outros dias, né, num texto que ele chama de Paulo Freire, Outras Infâncias para a Infância. E esse material depois eu vou compartilhar com o grupo, para que vocês leiam e a gente possa aprofundar. Então, o que a gente vê? Ele pensou a infância não como etapas cronológicas, o que tem muita aderência com o que foi apresentado pelo Franco. Por quê? Porque ele diz que o ser humano ele está em eterno inacabamento, inconclusão e incompletude. Nós somos sempre seres em constante transformação. Então, ele vê a criança como um ser em constante transformação, tal como qualquer outro ser. Ele tem uma preocupação maior dele, foi com a prática educativa. Então, qualquer prática educativa. Então, a centralidade da educação está no educando. Então, para a gente, a centralidade do cuidado e da pesquisa com criança está na criança. Então, esse é o paralelo que a gente consegue fazer. Então, essa cosmovisão do ser criança como agente moral, que eu chamei aqui na teoria de Carnevale, implica em uma prática de pesquisar e cuidar e ensinar a cuidar, fundada em processos participativos e emancipatórios. Na cosmovisão freiriana do ser criança, ele pensa essa criança como um cidadão de direito, que implica numa prática de educar fundada em processos participativos e emancipatórios. Então, esse foi a aproximação que eu ainda estou construindo, mas que até depois de ter, né, de ler sobre Paulo Freire, trabalhar com ele em algumas teses e dissertações e publicações, né, a gente vai depois aprofundar um pouco mais com o grupo do projeto para a gente fazer essa aproximação com a América Latina, porque Paulo Freire é conhecido em toda a América Latina. É isso. Freire, Franco, seus comentários. Franco, would you like to comment?
I feel I've been talking too much. I would like to hear what everybody else. I have to say, it was funny. Your comment when I finished was you felt I was saying what you try to say, and I was listening to you, and I said it's remarkable how we have traveled very different pathways, but I think our vision and our understanding of childhood is quite similar.
Yeah.
We have learned from different authors, different philosophies, and yet we seem to have such an intersection in the way in which we understand children's nursing. But I also believe that what you just described is, I am excited to learn with you because I see so much opportunity to build this further. I think Freire really brings much, much more depth in terms of understanding oppression, participation. Is absolutely so well developed that I'm just so excited about that. I'm so honored to be a part of this group.
Yeah, the oppression, for example, when we deny the right of children to making question, deny the participation of in education profile, directed to the needs of child. So, of course, they are talking about in the field of education, not in the field of healthcare. No, but you can see the cosmovision. I would like this idea, the cosmovision, the ontology. It's very, very connected to the way you are expressing this possibility of thinking, research, and the clinical way of caring for children. E agora, pessoal, está aberto aí para os comentários e as aproximações, e ainda temos aí pelo menos uns 10 minutos para isso. Perguntas, comentários, seria interessante os comentários de vocês. Estão shy. Miriam, por favor.
Nossa, é tão rico tudo isso. Realmente, como o Franco falou, existe uma complementaridade muito grande, né, nesses autores e nessa fonte de onde vocês dois beberam, né? Eu amo Paulo Freire, não conheço o suficiente ainda, Ivone, mas eu fico cada vez que eu ouço assim, maravilhada com essa teoria e pensando que pena que o nosso país não adotou assim, inteiramente, né, o Paulo Freire como norte educativo. A gente teria uma educação, né, e uma sociedade tão melhor se a gente tivesse escutado mais ele, né? Mas, enfim, o que eu queria comentar, assim, eu estava pensando enquanto tu falavas, Ivone, como a gente foi de um extremo ao outro, assim, ouvindo a infância, né, aquele relato da infância do Paulo Freire, e lembrando de como a infância era tratada naquela época, em que, sim, né, para muitos de vocês, talvez o trabalho durante a infância não tenha sido raro, né? De certa maneira, a infância era concebida dessa forma, eram mini-adultos, né? Tipo assim, as crianças tinham que ajudar no trabalho em casa, eles não tinham seus direitos ouvidos, né? Só que a gente vai desse extremo para um outro na sociedade, pelo menos na sociedade brasileira, não sei se no restante da América Latina é assim, mas eu acredito que nós temos muitas similaridades, onde a criança ela tem que ser completamente protegida. E em nome dessa proteção, em nome dessa permissão para que ela seja criança, para que ela não seja envolvida em trabalho infantil, para que ela, né, ela tenha a possibilidade de brincar, a gente, nesse ímpeto de proteção, a gente esquece de que eles são sujeitos e, de certa maneira, a gente infantiliza eles ao ponto de achar que eles não têm a capacidade de participar e de ter voz e de ter uma visão, uma análise da realidade e os seus conceitos do certo, do errado, do bom, do mal, do que importa, do que não importa para eles, né? E, inclusive, a impossibilidade de participar nas definições políticas, das definições sociais e nas decisões que vão impactar a vida deles no futuro, né? Como, por exemplo, as questões ambientais, sustentabilidade, o que os adultos estão fazendo com o mundo deles, antes deles poderem participar em relação a isso. Então, para mim, né, ter tido contato com todo esse conhecimento, né, todo esse framework do Voice, foi esse momento assim de abrir a minha mente para isso, assim. Nossa, a gente precisa parar com essa ideia de que crianças não têm a capacidade de falar por si, né? Então, de certa maneira, a gente precisa desinfantilizar eles um pouco, a gente precisa acreditar nessa capacidade que eles têm de participar da sua maneira, né? Então, como nós podemos ouvi-los, como a gente pode perceber a realidade deles dessa forma. E a pesquisa é o caminho, né? Então, parabéns pelas iniciativas. Eu também estou muito contente de ver todo esse trabalho florescendo dessa forma. Parabéns para vocês.
Obrigada, Miriam, pelos seus comentários. E aí eu queria dizer que a gente continua vivendo entre dois mundos. Nós temos ainda o mundo do trabalho infantil, das crianças que são homeless, né, das crianças que hoje, por exemplo, saiu o resultado da pesquisa do Observatório de Políticas Públicas, indicando que tem 10 mil crianças, tá? Não é nem adolescente, crianças, só crianças, vivendo nas ruas do Brasil. E que 90% dessas 10 mil crianças estão localizadas em um único estado, né? E depois vem o segundo estado, e um paradoxo, porque um estado, um dos mais pobres do Brasil, né? E o outro é o estado mais rico do Brasil. São os dois estados brasileiros, é um grande contraste que a gente vê, dois estados brasileiros de crianças que estão vivendo nas ruas, vivendo do trabalho nas ruas para sobreviver, né? E a gente olha isso e vê que, por um lado, tem um excesso de infantilização, por outro também tem um excesso de autonomia, quando libera as crianças para ficar 100% do seu tempo nas telas, né, em telas de celular, em telas de tablet, no mundo da internet, vulnerabilizando essas crianças. Então, assim, tem uma aparente proteção, acho que está uma falsa proteção, né? E uma falsa também é um descompromisso com uma infância autêntica. E aqui tem outro conceito bem interessante de Paulo Freire, que é a autenticidade da criança, né? A valorização da autenticidade da criança na sua forma de se expressar e comunicar. E, da mesma forma, ele está sendo negado o direito de cidadania, né? Esse direito da cidadania da criança está sendo negado, ela não está vivendo o papel dela de criança. Mais algum comentário, alguma questão que vocês gostariam de compartilhar?
Não, eu gostaria de parabenizar a iniciativa, a tua iniciativa e do professor Franco, porque eu acho que é muito interessante. Cada vez mais a gente vê o quanto é necessário a gente estar habilitado, preparar os nossos colegas, os outros profissionais, não só da saúde, mas como o nosso foco é a saúde, né, a saúde, de poder respeitar, de poder ser sensível, né, às necessidades das crianças e saber realmente acolher e dar voz, né? Então, acho que é um trabalho maravilhoso, parabéns.
Mais alguém? Comentário? Perguntas? Não? Jocelyn, quer fazer o encerramento? Franco, I think that we are finished. Mônica, acredito que precisamos calibrar nossa forma de ver a infância. Vou ver aqui, pois precisamos incluir a capacidade delas opinarem, né? Pensamos que deixá-las falarem é tirar a infância delas. Incluir na prática o direito delas falarem e de serem ouvidas. Eu tenho um projeto de extensão, acho que aqui não tem ninguém que já foi lá. É muito interessante, que é aquele projeto Gênero Graça. Então, a gente tem feito ele nas escolas municipais inclusivas, né? E as crianças, quando elas participam, elas lideram, elas estão liderando, né? Liderando as ações. Então, nós desenvolvemos atividades baseadas em arte, trabalhando com artistas que vêm do mundo deles, né, e que têm projeção internacional, como é o caso, por exemplo, do Maxwell Alexandre, que é um artista plástico que faz autorretrato em par de papel, e aí eles são eles que conduzem o processo. E isso, eles têm um empoderamento, e eles apresentam nas feiras, dizendo, isso foi uma criação minha, né, uma criação minha. E aí, assumindo a identidade deles, de quem eles são, negros, são pretos, que vivem em comunidades pobres, mas que estudam, e que são criativos, e que têm uma potência, e que dizem o que querem, e como querem, né? E é muito interessante que desenvolve nele um espírito de cidadania, de urbanidade, de cooperação, né? Que é importante no processo de socialização da infância, né? E isso baseado nessa crença, né, de que os processos participativos eles são emancipadores. Muito bem. Comentário, Franco, your last word for finishing?
I said too much.
Okay.
I think everything you've just said is absolutely beautiful. It's so inspiring.
Ok. Jocelyn, você quer fazer o encerramento da clausura?
Obrigada, doctora Ivone. No, un momentito, voy a deshabilitar
A foto.
las fotos, sí.
Abre las cámaras para hacer la foto. Ah. ¿Tú consigues hacer la foto con las 32 personas?
Estoy en esa, prenda su cámara. Ay, estoy en esa, estoy justo. ¿Alguien más que me puede ayudar, por favor? Yo estoy tratando de...
Só sale se abre la cámara, si no se...
¿Alguien más pudo tomar la foto?
Nada más. Muy bien. Muchas gracias por todo, la audiencia de esos 3 días de encuentro. Y así, Jocelyn hace la clausura.
Sí, doctora. Claro que sí. Bueno, quiero, a nombre de la Red Internacional de Salud Infantil, y en especial de la Coordinación de Investigación a cargo de nuestra mentora, la doctora Ivonne Cabral, agradecer a todos, al equipo de Voices Children Nursing, por estos 3 talleres, estos 3 días que hacen que nosotros pensemos un poco más en cómo tenemos que trabajar con los niños. Los niños son los de ahora, no son el futuro. Los niños no son adultos pequeños. Y entenderlos, comprenderlos. Quiero agradecer a todas las colegas de toda Latinoamérica que están presentes, de Colombia, María Luisa, está Ledia de Cuba, está Olga de Colombia, está Abigail de México, está Norma de Perú, están muchos colegas de varios países, si no voy a ver quién más está, por toda su participación, tanto en el Zoom, como también está también la doctora Gloria López, coordinadora de la red ENSI México, nuestra Paz, coordinadora de la red ENSI México, la doctora Isabel Álvarez, está Ledia de Cuba, varias colegas de Perú, Liliana, Norma,
Yolanda,
la coordinadora de la red ENSI Perú, Liliana, muchas gracias por su participación. Y bueno, pues ahora nos toca trabajar ahora, no el futuro, trabajar ahora por nuestros niños y adolescentes de Iberoamérica, no solamente Latinoamérica, sino también Iberoamérica. Muchísimas gracias, doctora. Están saludándonos desde, así escriban en el chat de dónde son para poderlas conocer, porque no conocemos a muchos. Muchas gracias al equipo, muchas gracias Franco, a todo tu equipo, a todas las colegas que nos han dado a conocer su trabajo. Muchísimas gracias. Doctor Ivonne, nuevamente muchísimas gracias y sigamos trabajando por nuestra profesión de enfermería y por nuestros niños. Gracias. Doy clausurado el evento.
yo voy a cerrar la grabación.
Ok, doctora.
Ok.